Good morning, students. And the today's topic that we are going to study is student-centered approach. This approach is totally different from the teacher-centered approach that we have learned or studied earlier. Now, the learning objectives of today's topic are student-centered approach means the student will able to know that this is the concept of student-centered approach. Second one is why student-centered learning. Why we are saying that we have to adopt student-centered learning as it's a new approach and we do not have to learn or to make students learn only through the old traditional methods of learning. Main characteristics of student-centered class. What are the different characteristics of a student-centered class? Advantages. What are the advantages of student-centered approach? Last one is disadvantages, means you will able to know what are the different disadvantages of student-centered approach. The term student-centered learning means the term which is referring to as a student-centered learning refers means student-centered learning means to a wide variety of educational programs. Refers to wide variety means are various educational programs that are included in student-centered learning. Learning experiences means the experiences which a learner got through the learning. Instructional approaches, the instructions approach that will be used by the teacher to teach the learners. And academic support strategies and different support strategies, and these support strategies will help the learners to achieve more or to improve their learning and academics that are intended to address the distinct learning needs, and all these things are there so that the distinct learning needs of the learners can be achieved. Interest, every learner has its own interest, means there is a wide range of interest when we are talking about the learners. So that student-centered learning approaches satisfy or fulfill or accomplish the interests of the distance learners also. Aspirations or cultural background of individual students and group of students, and the different cultural backgrounds of individual students means uh, it is satisfying the students from anywhere he will come from any culture. That student-centered learning will help to satisfy their learning. And group of students and the number of students also, we are not focusing on a particular or specific individual. We are saying that every student, every learner need will be satisfied if the teacher will use the student-centered learning approaches in the class. Now, to accomplish this goal, now which goal? So that the needs of every student fulfill, interests, aspirations, all these group members will able to satisfy that. To accomplish this goal, schools, teachers, guidance counselors, and other educational specialists may employ a wide variety of educational methods. Now, all the teachers, all the school members, all the guidance counselors, and other educational specialists are using teacher centered approach in place of student-centered approach, means they are focusing on student-centered approach because student-centered approach is satisfying or it's helpful in achieving the educational objectives and the interests, the aspirations, the needs of every learner. And that's why they are using a wide variety of educational methods, means they are not uh, making the students learn only by a few methods, or they are just employing lecture method or the inductive deductive method or the role play method. No, they are using a very wide variety of educational methods then they are teaching their students. from modifying assignments and instructional strategies. Modifying assignment changes in the assignment, the pattern of assignment, and instructional strategy, the way in which we are giving the instructions to the learner in the classroom, to entirely redesigning the ways in which students are grouped and taught in a school. And redesigning the way means the various methods or the new approaches will be redesigned in such a way that all the students are able to satisfy their needs. The term student-centered learning most likely arouse in responses to educational decisions. Arouse in responses to the educational decisions will be which will be taken that did not fully consider, and these decisions are not fully considered. What student needed? What is the need of the students? To know or what methods would be most effective in facilitating learning for individual students or group of students, and what method means which teaching method should be used by the teacher so that that method will be considered as the most effective method, and that will facilitate the learning among the individual students or group of students. Means that method will be such that it will satisfy the need of not only the individual students but also the needs of the group of students. For example, many traditional approaches to schooling could be considered. School centered means that is focusing on the school rather than student centered. Many traditional approaches to schooling means many schools are following the traditional way of teaching the students, and that as that they are not able to satisfy the needs of the learner. Every learner interest needs will not be satisfied if the teacher will focus on using the traditional approaches to teach the student. Consider school centered rather than student centered, and they should focus on student centered approach rather than using the school-centered approach. Now, why is school-centered approach? That the school-centered approach is that approach that is considered to be the best by the organization, so that they do not have to uh, improve their infrastructure, and they think that this is the most organized and managed way for teaching the students. But the most effective method of teaching the students or the learner is the student center. Because schools are often organized, they are organized and managed in ways that work well for organization operation, but that might not reflect the most effective ways to educate students. Means they have to change their strategy. They have to move from the school centered approach to the student centered approach, where so that every student can be, needs can be satisfied first thing, and that will be considered as the effective way to teach or to educate the students. For example, it's more manageable from an institution, administrative, or logistic perspective. Now, what is that? That we are focusing, or the schools are focusing on the old traditional method and the school centered approach because it is a more manageable approach from the perspective of institutional, administrative, or logistical perspective. If all students are being taught in classroom under the supervision of teachers, means all the students in a particular class being taught in a classroom under the supervisions of teacher. If they are given a fixed set of course options to choose from, and they have given a fixed set of course that this course has to be completed by you, if they all use the same textbooks and learning resources, and all the teachers are using the same textbooks and learning resources, or if Their education unfolds according to the predetermined schedule. Now, why student centered learning? Why we are saying that we have to move from the traditional approach of teaching to the student centered learning? What is the basic need of that? Provide substance and arrange activities in line with the learners. Now, that is an activity that will help the learners to learn in a proper order, and it's provide assistance and arrange all the activities in online. Provide training in thinking process means student-centered learning gives an opportunities to the learner so that they can think in a proper process. Management, how to face various situations and how they can face various situations in their life. Enable learners to think critically, and that's it important that the student-centered learner approach makes the learner to think in a critical way. Both learner and teacher may learn together. When we are talking about the uh, teacher-centered approach or the old traditional methods of approaches, here the learner is not equally involved in the learning process. But when we are talking about the student-centered learning, both teachers and learners are involved or learn together. Individuals to learn at all times and in all places. No, the student-centered approach gives the students the opportunity to learn at all times and in all places. Means we are not saying that uh, it is limited only to the classroom teaching or instruction. Advocates of student-centered learning wants to challenge or overturn many common organizational or instructional tendencies in schools by making student learning the primary objective. And those who are advocates of student learning centered learning approach means those who are thinking that this is the best method to teach the student will consider that the primary aim of school is to make student learning effective for the learners. That is all considerations that do not in some way improve or facilitate student learning would become secondary or lower in importance. The basic rationale is that schools should be designed to enhance means to increase student learning, not improve organizational efficiency. What they are saying that one of the primary objective of the teaching or the school is that it should enhance the students learning. Mm, and we are not focusing on to improve the organizational efficiency. So, the primary objective of the school is to develop, to enhance, to improve the students' learning, and it can only be done through the student centered learning approach, and it cannot be achieved through if the teacher is using the traditional approaches of learning in their classroom teaching. Now, beliefs about learning. Students learn in different ways. Now the teacher has to use the different methods, different approaches and techniques and strategies to make the students learn. So a student-centered approach is saying that every student learn in a different manner and teachers are using the different ways to learn them. While in the traditional method, the teacher follows only those methods or the strategy which from which he wants to make the students learn. How can we find out? And how can we find out which method is the best? And this can be employed only when the teacher is using different strategies, approaches in the classroom teaching. And after the evaluation, the teacher will come to know that this is the best method to teach them. Beliefs about learning. Learning is an active, dynamic process. When we are considering a student centered approach, we are involving the students in the active learning process. And in the old traditional method, students are, when they are involved in the learning process, they are just the passive listener who is receiving the information. So, when we are talking about student-centered approach, learning is an active dynamic process because both teacher and students are involved in the teaching learning process. How can we get our students engaged in learning? Now we have to decide that which teaching methodology should be used. So we can say that a student-centered learning approaches should be used by the teacher, then they will able to engage students in learning. Stu- Belief about learning. Students respond well when they are involved. When they are involved in the teaching learning process, we will get the responses of the students well. How can we involve them? When we will use student-centered approach in the classroom teaching. Beliefs about learning. So learn with guidance, not prescriptions. Now you have to work as a guider, as a facilitator, and that will make their learning more. How can SS be encouraged in student? Be encouraged to try things out and discover. Means how can we encourage the students so that they will try things out in a different manner and discover new learning. Belief about learning. Knowledge is internal. Students build it. What is the teacher role? The teacher role is to facilitate, to guide, to supervise the learning of the learners. Discuss in pairs. In your class, you have to discuss this. Who produces more? You as a teacher or your students? Means we have to discuss in the class where the knowledge production is more. When you as a teacher is giving the information to the learners, that's it. Or when both student and teacher are actively involved in the teaching learning process. Old traditional approach. Most class time is spent with the teacher lecturing and the student watching and listening. Now what is this saying? Then when the teacher is using the old traditional approaches to teach the students, then most of the time the teacher just give a lecture, means imparting of the information, and the students just watching what information is being given by the teacher first thing and listening, and they just listen as a passive listener what the teacher is saying. Students work individually on assignments, and all the students work individually on different assignments, and cooperation is discouraged. Activities have more meaningful purpose, and the activities, different activities which has been used, have no meaningful purpose. We can get this result. Oh, or maybe this one. If the students are not actively involved in the teaching learning process. Now, student centered methods shift the focus of activities from the teacher to the learner. If the, if a person, if a teacher wants to shift from the old traditional methods of teaching to the student centered methods, then then all this importance or the focus of teaching learning process will be shift from the teacher to the students. Now keywords. Active learning means students are not passively involved in the learning process, means they are not just listening what the teachers are saying, they are actively involved in the learning process. Assess during class means students during class create some new knowledge, brainstorm, explain the new concept, debate on some concept, formulate questions of their own. Means they will frame their own questions, and the students will do to solve or to get the answers of those questions which they have got. Answer questions, they have different questions in their mind and discuss. They will discuss among themselves. Solve problem means problem solving attitude will be developed in them. Main characteristic of a student-centered class. What are the different, or we can say the main characteristic if a teacher is adopted an approach, and that is a student-centered class. Students are active adults, means students are actively involved in the teaching learning process. They are not just the passive listeners or the receiver of the knowledge. Teachers are organizers. The teacher are organizing each and everything. Little time on TTT, 20% of the lesson means less time, little time on teacher's timetable, and that is the 20% of the lesson. A checklist we should meet in order to achieve a student-centered learning. Now, a checklist has to be prepared, and it is prepared in such a way that we will able to know whether we will able to achieve the objective of student-centered learning or not. When thinking about activities and tasks to include in a lesson, when thinking about activities, what are the different activities that can be used? And tasks to include, and different tasks that has to be included in our lesson plans. A checklist for meeting a student-centered learning. The activity or task must contain prediction, means it is able to predict the future performances of the learner. Self-discovery means how they are involved in the discovery of new knowledge and information. Lesson involvement, how much the students are involved in the teaching learning process. Knowledge application, whether the student is able to apply the knowledge or not, means application of the knowledge is there or not. Varied student interaction patterns and various way can be developed through which the student can interact. Now, we can achieve this checklist through different kinds of activities. Means if we want to achieve this activity, then we have to use different kinds of activities in the class in the during the teaching learning process. SCL, student centered learning. Games, songs with learning values. If we want to make them learn about the different values, we can use technique where there will be some games or songs they have to perform on some songs, etc. Activities should be there, tasks should be there with varied interaction patterns, means this will be achieved by the teacher if they are involved in them with the various type of activities and assign them various tasks. Keep in mind all of the tasks and activities that teachers prepare must facilitate a positive and effective learning environment. Now, all of the tasks and activities means all the activities or the tasks that are being designed by the teacher or prepared by the teacher should be such that it should facilitate a positive and effective learning environments among the teaching learning process. It's your turn. Present a student centered activity using a page of your book. Demonstrate a student centered activity. Take into consideration the checklist and characteristics mentioned. Prediction, you have to able to predict. Self discovery, whether the students will able to discover some fact or not. Lesson involvement, how different students are involved in the lesson planning or not. Knowledge application means the knowledge which they will get will able to apply that knowledge or not. Various student interaction patterns means various interaction patterns among the students. Now we are students. TCL versus HCL, teacher centered learning versus student centered learning. So everyone wants, every learner wants that the teacher should teach with student centered learning in comparison to teacher centered learning. Now, analysis and reflection. Work with your partner and make a list of conclusions based on the answers to the questions discussed in the beginning. How can we find out the different ways our students learn? What can be the different methods or what can be the different teaching strategies that can be employed by the teachers so that their students or their learners learn in a different manner or ways? How can we get our students engaged in learning? Or how we can make our students engage in the learning process? How can how can we involve students or how can we involve the students in teaching learning process? How can students be encouraged to try things out and discover, to try out different things and discover new knowledge? What's the teacher role? What is the role of the teacher when the teacher is using a student centered approach in classroom teaching? Now, benefits of SCL means student centered learning approaches. Student can work in small groups, they can work in small groups at school. At school, some small groups will be created and they will work together. Or home, or they can that school small groups can be formed at schools and at homes also. Have access to more material. The student have the access to use more and more material. Are directly involved in what they study, and they are the students are directly involved in the teaching learning process as they are not passive listeners. Take ownership of their own learning. They will take the ownership of their learning. Are motivated and committed, and they are motivated and committed to complete that task or activity in the prescribed time. Now, for benefits for a teacher when the teacher is using a student centered learning approach. Acts as a facilitator or a guide. The teacher role is just to guide and supervise the learner. Helps to work out learning strategies. What will be the different learning strategy? Develop student research ability, and when they are involved themselves in the discovery of knowledge, when they are involved themselves in searching of the new knowledge, then it will develop uh, among students the research ability. A good teacher is one who makes himself progressively unnecessarily. This is the definition of a teacher who is so progressively passive under the different circumstances, and this definition was given by Thompson. Now, difference between teacher-centered learning and the student-centered learning. No individual accountable means students are not accountable for their own learning. Whereas in student-centered learning, individual accountability, it is the duty, the responsibility of every individual to take part in that. Responses for oneself, responses for each other. Here, the teacher-centered learning, the responses are for oneself, and here When we are talking about the student-centered learning, the responses for each other. Very passive means learners are passive. Student-centered learning very active because they are involved in the teaching learning process. Follow the course profile when we are talking about this teacher-centered learning. Select and divert the learning groups and for different work or to different assignments. Try to keep the students in their own seats, means do not allow the students to go from one place to another. If he is going, then if if he has taken the permission, then only he or she can go from one place to another. If he hasn't taken the permission, and then also he has changes that, then he will get some punishment from the teacher. Arrange the classroom and assign the work. But when we are talking about the student-centered approach, the whole class will be changed according to the needs of the learner. Provide detailed information, as the information will be shared by the teacher to the students, so they are providing a detailed information regarding them. Facilitator of learner. Learning means the teacher will act as a facilitator, as a mentor, as a guide, and he is working as a facilitator to give the learning experiences to the learner. Now, disadvantages. Strengthen students' motivation means a student-centered approach. Strength student motivation to learn. Promote peer communication means peer communication between the different members of the group. Reduce descriptive behavior. Build student-teacher relationship, that the student-teacher relationship or the bond will be established. Promote discovery active learning. Responsibility for own learning. The student is responsible for its own learning. Now, the disadvantages of student centered approach, problems of misconception. Learning in alternative ways means the teacher will apply different methods to teach. Lack of team skills means uh, there is a lacking of different skills when we are talking about the team skills. Different stages of same project means same project was been given and the different stages of same project are there. Problem of instructions means sometimes it is difficult for the learner to understand the instructions which are imparted by the teacher. Uncomfortability, sometimes the teachers or the students are not comfort with this learning approach or situations or the technique. Now today, students, we have learned about the concept of teacher-centered approach, how the teacher-centered approach is different from the old traditional methods of teaching. What are the advantages and the disadvantages of teaching the students with this approach, and why this approach is so much important. For further reading on this topic, you can refer these references. Now let us discuss some MCQs, as MCQs are the best way to judge what are the learning objectives and how much we are able to accomplish those learning objectives and what will be the learning outcomes of the learner. The first one is the term dash learning refers to a wide variety of educational programs that are intended to address distance learning needs of an individual student. Now, what do we call that term? Where the learning is referring to a wide variety of educational programs and that are intended means that educational programs are intended to address the distinct learning needs of the different individuals. Now the options are A student centered, B teacher C. Mentor, or it's D. Guide. So the correct answer is option A, that is student centered learning refers to a learning where a wide variety of educational programs are designed or intended to address the distinct learning needs of individual students. Now the second one is the term dash most likely arose in responses to educational decisions that did not fully consider what students need to know. Means that is not focusing on which method is that is not focusing on student need to know what is the need, what they want to know, and which method is that which is focusing or giving focus on the student needs to know and educational responses how they are responding to that. Now the options are student centered learning, B teacher centered learning, C mentor learning, or it's D activity learning. So the correct answer is option A, that is student centered learning. Now, student-centered learning provide dash in thinking process, management, how to face various situations. Now, student-centered learning means the approach that has been used is the student-centered learning, and that approach provides in thinking process means the student will try to think in a different way. Management and how to face various situations that will be used. Now, the options are A. Training, B. Learning, C. Teaching, or it's D. Game. Now, these are the options A, B, C, D. Now, you have to select the correct one on the basis of the given choices, and the correct answer is training. So, student centered learning provides training in thinking process, how we think, management, and how to face various situations. Dash individuals to learn at all time and in all places. Who is giving the students or the learners that opportunity that they will able to learn at all time and in all places. Now the options are student centered learning, B. Teacher centered learning, C. Mentor learning, or it's D. Activity learning. So these are the options A, B, C, D. Now you have to select the correct one on the basis of the given choices, and the correct answer is student centered learning. Means student centered learning is that learning that is giving individuals to learn at all time and at all places. Student-centered learning provides substance and arrange activities in line according to the learners. So options are A activities, B learning, C objectives, or it's D teaching. So the correct answer is option A, that is activities. Who stated that a good teacher is one who make himself progressively unnecessarily. Now, the options are A. Thompson, B. Bacon, C. Aristotle, or D. Jackson. So, these are the options A, B, C, D. Now, you have to select the correct one on the basis of the given choices, and the answer will be option A, that is Thompson. Now, the seventh one in student centered approach can work in small groups at school and home. In student-centered approach, who can work in small groups at school or at home. Now the options are A. Student, B. Guide, C. Mentor, or it's D. Teacher. So who is working on that? Now the correct answer is option A, that is student. So a student approach work, it's give an opportunity or provides an opportunity to the learners or the students so that they can work in small groups at either at home or at school. Now the eighth one in student centered approach dash acts as a facilitator and a guide. Now, who works as a facilitator, as a guide when we are talking about a student centered approach? Now the options are A. Teachers, B. Student, C. Learner, or it's D. All the above given choices. Now students, you have to select the correct one on the basis of the given choices, and the correct answer will be yes. The correct answer will be option A, that is teacher. So in student-centered approach, the teacher is responsibility is not only to impart the knowledge. The role of the teacher will be work as a facilitator and a guide. Now the ninth one, in dash approach, most class time is spent while the teacher lecturing and the student watching as listening. Now, which type of method is called when most of the time the class time is spent while the teacher learning, means the teacher is giving the lecture. Most of the time the teacher is doing that activity and student watching and listening, and the role or the responsibility of the teach learner is that they are just student watching what is going on and listening what is being listened. So it's a traditional method, B modern, C new, or it's D, none of the above given choices. Now, what will be the correct answer? And the correct answer will be option A, that is traditional. So, in traditional, most class time is spent where the teacher is just lecturing the students, giving her his talk on a particular subject, and the role of the student is just a passive listener who is just listening and watching what the teacher is going uh, is saying or what instruction has been imparted by him. So the correct answer is option A, that is traditional. Now the tenth one, all of the tasks and activities that dash prepare must facilitate an effective learning environment. All of the tasks and activities that dash with us. Now, who prepared those tasks and activities, and they are preparing in such a way by them that that activities, that task will definitely facilitate, motivate an effective learning environment, and that facilitate the guide and an effective learning environment in which uh, there is a better learning of the learners, and they will uh, engage themselves in the learning process, and they effectively learn in a better manner and their achievements are better. So A, teachers, those who are preparing the tasks and activities, and that facilitates an effective learning environment. It's the two teacher who plan the activities. C, learners, it's the learner who is preparing those, or it's the people who are preparing that. So the correct answer will be option A, that is a teacher. So all of the tasks and activities that are prepared by the teacher are to facilitate an effective learning environment in the class. Now, thank you students. With this particular narration you have understood the concept of student-centered learning, and how student-centered learning uh, is different from the old traditional method of teaching the students. And next we have discussed that what is the main concept or the concept of the student-centered learning, and we come to know that this is an approach where the students are actively involved in the teaching learning process. They are not just the passive listeners and getting the information from the uh, uh, teacher and just noting down the main points in their notebook. It's not that, and it should be planned. The student-centered learning should be planned in such a way that needs of all the students has to be satisfied, their interests, their aspirations, what they want to learn, and they how they want to learn. All these practices should be designed in such a way that students are engaged in the teaching learning process, and if they are engaged in the teaching learning process, then their learning will be more effective and efficient. First thing. Second thing, it will develop in them some concepts, and that is that the concept of problem solving, how to solve the problem, discovery, how to discover or create or formulate new information, and at the same time it will uh, the work of the teacher has also needs to be changed, and the work of the teacher is not just to giving the information, but it will work as a facilitator and guide for the students. And then we discuss about the advantages and disadvantages of using the student-centered learning approaches in the class. So in the next class, students, we will discuss about problem solving approach. Thank you so much for your patience listening.